Hyacinths and Magic, Chapter 1. The Sorting. Potter! Hyacinth! The low, persistent murmur that had permeated the great hall hushed as I stepped forward, back straight and determined, at the very least, not to look like I was about to whip myself. I turned to sit, and Professor McGonagall lowered the sorting hat down onto my head. There was a few seconds of silence. No doubt the hat was trying to come to terms with the reality of my bonkers situation. However, there was a question that I desperately needed answered. Well, I thought to the hat, is it there? Can you sense it? Miss Shizuku, a small voice whispered in my ear, you realize that I am not a dark detector, yes? Let alone an artifact designed to rout out something so insidious and subtle as a Horcrux. My job is to decide where 11-year-olds will sleep for the next 7 years. I squirmed at being called my name for the first time in this world. I had to try, didn't I? Not like I can exactly ask anyone else for help. You could, in fact, go to Dumbledore. If that most likely paranoid old man finds out that there's an adult mind in Hyacinth Potter's brain, he'll likely jump to the worst possible conclusion, and I'm not about to prove myself by letting him dig about in my subconscious like you are. Yes, well, I can see there is no convincing you. On with the actual sorting, then. Oh, that part's easy. Hufflepuff. There was a long, drawn-out sigh. Miss Shizuku, I would hope that I could do a slightly more thorough job than an online survey, one written by people who thought that the school was a made-up fantasy at that. Look, I started to argue, but the hat spoke over me. You seem to have a fairly one-dimensional view of yourself. Take Slytherin, for example. You're convinced of your inability to be cunning whatsoever, but remember how you dealt with your cousin's bullying in this life before it even became a problem? Shizuku had been Hyacinth for just over 2 years when Dudley had worked out that if he punched me I would be punished for provoking him. At first my plan with Dudley had simply been to keep as far away from him as possible, but when Petunia had fed him a candy to make him feel better after my apparently evil plot to read a picture book and make him feel bad, I knew I couldn't be passive. The next time he had toddled in my direction with that vindictive little gleam in his eyes, I had been ready. Go nose! I crowed triumphantly, having tweaked his nose before holding my fist up as though I had it. I didn't want Petunia realizing just how advanced I was, so my thumb was not where it should be for that trick, but it was entirely enough to worry a genuinely 3-year-old Dudley. His hand slapped onto his face, a look of horror quickly morphing into one of childish rage. No, do! His little knees bopped like he wanted to stomp, but was not quite managing it. Petunia whirled around from where she stood prepping dinner in the kitchen, adult fury on her face. Oh, I most silly we did that when I was Elmy. I looked at my empty hand as though it was somehow disappointing. Dudley looked angry. This paused them both. Dudley especially seemed unsure what to make of the situation. Petunia, though, lectured me by saying that I was not to speak of those people, and that pretending to steal someone's nose was not how we stopped them from being angry in this house. I had pretended to think really hard about that before exclaiming that Dudley needed his candy, forcing Petunia to decide if she actually wanted to outright say, yes, candy is how we stop people from being angry in this house. Anyone familiar with the Dursley household before then could have easily imagined the pandemonium that ensued when she tried to tentatively say that no, it wasn't, and all Dudley understood from that was that he might not be getting candy right that second. And so it went. Any time that Dudley tried to use his fists on me, I would do something to disrupt the situation and make it about helping Dudley feel better in ridiculous and unhelpful ways. That was a 30-year-old woman dealing with a toddler, I thought in protest. You were dealing with your aunt and uncle's bad parenting tactics, but fine, how about Gryffindor and that time you confronted your uncle about magic? I was 5 years old and just about to start my first day at primary. Aunt Petunia had gotten rid of that dratted mat the night before, and though I wasn't quite as upset about it as a genuine child would have been, I still didn't want to go to school bald. I had been extremely careful about not exploring magic in obvious ways before then, and both Petunia and Uncle Vernon seemed to think that I had forgotten the existence of it, content in the fact that I never mentioned it or did anything odd. In reality, I hadn't been utterly idle, but I had confined myself to mostly just feeling the warmth of it in my body and trying to see if I could move it around at all. Part of me was desperate to try something cool, but a bigger part had remembered a scene in one of my favorite fanfics, where the main character had asked why wandless magic wasn't taught at Hogwarts, and the response had been a question of whether they would like to accidentally blow up their wand while practicing, or their hand. I had no way of knowing how relevant my current situation was to that question, but it left me cautious. Even then, I didn't plan on trying to cast any kind of real spell. I just wanted to see if I could deliberately induce some accidental magic. So that night, as I drifted off, I had said a mantra to myself of, I want my hair back, I want my hair back. Sure enough, when I woke up the next morning, my hair was not only back, but long enough to brush my knees. My first feat of genuine magic had left me giddy enough that neither Petunia's screeching nor Vernon's bellowing could wipe the smile off my face. I just skipped past them, saying that I had wished on my magic as I went about getting breakfast ready. I knew that Vernon would never risk grabbing me if I was dealing with a hot frying pan. Eventually, I had enough of his demands to get into my cupboard, and I told him that I would tell the teacher when I eventually went to school that that was where I had been and why. Vernon had never actually been physically violent towards me before, but the look on his face when I said that did make me wonder if that was about to change right then. Still giddy from doing actual magic, but now feeling like maybe I had bit off more than I could chew, I shut up and got to serving. I will have no freaky business in this house, came the eventual venomous hiss. If I can sleep upstairs, I responded without looking up as I carefully put the toast in the toast rack. The color of his face actually looked bruised at that point, but he seemed to believe that I was serious about going to the teachers over my living situation. It was the biggest bluff of my lives. Between being able to be found by Riddle or a cupboard for a bedroom, the cupboard was delightful. It was not, I don't know, maybe it's past life memories, maybe it's that I'm a different soul to the baby Hyacinth that existed before that night entirely. I have no way to know. Either way, I'm just trying to make the most of my situation. If I had eyes to roll, I would be rolling then. That is literally the reality of life for everyone, and facing your problems down like that is very Gryffindor. But fine, how about that burning desire I can feel in your heart that demands you graduate having learned absolutely everything that you possibly can from here? You even hope for a time turner if you can get one. That is definitely Ravenclaw worthy. I huffed out loud before thinking very pointedly at the hat. I am in a literal magic world. I don't know how much people here take that for granted, but just because I will not does not mean that I enjoy study for study's sake. Look, my situation is what it is, but all I can really do is determine that I am going to work hard and make the best of it. Miss Shizuku, you are terrible at making friends, and self-motivation was your Achilles heel in your previous life. Even here you said it yourself. You do what you feel you need to do in order to survive. You intend to work hard in your studies here because you love the idea of being able to do wondrous magic, but you are not naturally studious. Determining to work hard because you either think it will help you in your goals or just because you want to know how magic is done is Slytherin and Ravenclaw respectively. It is decidedly not Hufflepuff. I crossed my arms. Maybe I'd get better at making friends and working hard if I were in Hufflepuff. The hat groaned quietly. You know what? You're not a child. You don't need handling with kid gloves. You intend to learn extremely advanced magics, sneak under the nose of the entire Wixen population, not to mention Albus Dumbledore, and kill off the most dangerous megalomaniac currently alive by the end of the Triwizard Tournament. There is really only one place you could possibly go. Slytherin! I went rigid as I tried not to show how off-kilter that pronouncement made me. Slowly I stood up in the utterly silent room, handed the hat back to a stiff McGonagall, and made my way over with as much poise as I could muster to sit beside the girl who had been pronounced Greengrass Daphne. I found myself looking across the table into the stony face of one Parkinson Pansy, and I tried not to dread the next 7 years too much.